Downing Street has dismissed the charge that the UK government is planning a post-Brexit power grab, seizing complete control over state aid once Britain completes its breakaway from the European Union. It follows reports suggesting that Boris Johnson intends to publish legislation this week aimed at ensuring that Westminster has the ultimate say on subsidies. That prompted the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, to take to Twitter, warning that if true, it would amount to a blatant move to erode the powers of the Scottish Parliament and a full-scale assault on devolution. We did ask to speak to the UK Government this morning, but we were told no one was available. Let's speak to Michael Russell, who is Scotland's Constitution Secretary. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Isn't it a little premature to talk about a full-scale assault on devolution when we don't actually have the published plans yet?
Oh no, I think we've seen enough over the past few years to realise that this is a trend. You can go all the way back to the Brexit referendum in 2016, where huge promises were being made. Michael Gove promised power over immigration, just to note an item in your news earlier. But none of that happened. And now we've seen powers being progressively eroded. Last week there was much discussion of whether or not these powers would extend to trade deals, they would extend to health and safety, they would extend to food standards, and they will. So having been a member of the committee negotiating with the UK for the last 4 years, I can tell you far from premature. This is now, I think, the end of the road, and there's no possibility of us accepting these changes.
Why do these state aid issues matter so much?
Well, state aid is really important, and these powers already exist in Scotland. The UK has argued for some considerable time that they don't exist, but actually they do exist as a state aid unit in the Scottish Government. And what they do is they make sure there's a level playing field in competition. And that's very important. If the people who manufacture, the people who produce things, farmers and fishermen as well, are able to compete fairly around these islands and in Europe. And if you actually distort that, as the UK wishes to do, then what will happen is that it'll be a race to the bottom. And that is exactly what they want. They want to give away powers in order to get trade deals, because they're going to be in a great deal of trouble over trade very shortly. And to do so, they need to control this, because we believe in the highest of standards and the highest of standards in trade deals. That's what keeps Scotland, gives Scotland the reputation it has, and we don't want to lose that.
So you want to control these powers so that you don't use them?
No, we want to control these powers so we can continue to have the highest of standards. I mean, we have.
But do you intend to use state aid?
Well, they're used all the time. They're used all the time because we already have everything you buy in the shops is subject, for example, in food terms, to European standards. Those are the standards we should keep. We should not change those standards and lower them. That will be the intention. And what will also be the intention of state aids is to buy companies in some way to compete, and those companies may compete with Scottish companies. So this will be damaging to our economy, damaging to our producers, damaging to our standards. This is part of the Brexit con. And we have to be very clear about that. But we saw more of it yesterday with £1 billion being spent on customs infrastructure. £1 billion. It's already cost the UK more money, Brexit, than they've paid to the EU since we joined more than 40 years ago. That's an astonishing figure, but it's true. But
wouldn't it be damaging to Scotland if there were different rules governing state aid in different parts of the UK? There'd be a potential race to the bottom there, with Scotland competing with Wales and Northern Ireland and England.
Not by us. No, not by us, because Wales is in exactly the same position. We want to keep the highest of standards. The danger here comes from the UK government, which wishes to compete to the bottom, to compete with those countries who have much lower standards. I mean, chlorinated chicken is talked about all the time, but it's a reality. There are lower food standards in the United States, regrettably, and that's where we are going. And nobody should be in any doubt about this. Nothing that Downing Street says about this or the UK government is true. What they want is to race to the bottom, and to do so they have to take powers away from the Scottish Parliament, from the Welsh Assembly, and they have to lower standards.
It's not taking powers away. It's not taking powers away when you don't have the powers in the first instance.
Yes, we do have the powers. No, sorry, this is a complete misunderstanding. We have state aid powers for devolved matters. We've had to have those, because if you think about it, state aids are about the total amounts of money going from the state to individuals, to companies and other organisations. Now, as the Scottish Government gives money, it has to be able to exercise those powers. So the state aid powers, according to the law that apply to devolved areas, already exist in Scotland. So that is the very definition of a power grab. It's taking those powers away, and that is what they are intending to do.
Isn't there an irony here, though, that ultimately your party's position is that if you were to achieve independence, that you would want to share regulatory standards and state aid rules with the whole of the EU, but you don't want to do it with the rest of the UK?
No, Gary, you're absolutely right. I want to share them with the rest of the EU, and I want the UK
but you don't want to
share
do it with,
that too.
You don't want to do it with the rest of the UK, though.
What I don't want to do is to lower them. So if the UK, the current UK government, which is determined on a race to the bottom, wishes to lower those standards, then I want to keep them high. I would like them to keep them high, and the best way to do so would be to give up the nonsense of Brexit. But if they're insisting on spending all this money, utterly pointlessly, to make us poorer, because Brexit is going to make us poorer, if they're insisting on doing that, then my job is to defend the Scottish interest. And the Scottish interest says, do not give those up, because that will lead to a lowering of standards, a very dangerous lowering of standards.
We spoke a little earlier to leading authority on EU law, George Peretz, QC. He says that some of the heat might be taken out of this issue if a new anti-subsidy authority was jointly appointed by the UK and devolved governments. Is that something you could sign up to?
Well, there's been no such proposal, but if any authority was to be set up, it would have to have absolute equality amongst the four nations. Now, that has never been part of the UK's intention, nor does it happen in anything we're involved in. And the reason for that lies in devolution, that the UK Parliament regards itself as sovereign. It regards itself as able to overrule the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Parliament, the Northern Ireland Parliament, whatever it wants. So I have seen no such offer in anything over the last 4 years, and I doubt it would happen here. The best way to solve this is for Scotland to be an independent member of the EU. In the meantime, the best way to resolve this is for the UK to get its hands off devolved powers and stop trying to undermine devolution.
Let me ask about another story. It's an exclusive on the Daily Record today. Your former colleague, former MSP Dave Thompson, who says he's going to quit your party after 55 years and he's backing the Alliance for Independence at the next election. It's a new party he says could win up to 24 seats at the next Holyrood elections. How big a threat might this new vehicle be to your party?
Anybody is entitled to join or to vote for any party they wish. I know Dave very well. I've worked very well with him. I think he's mistaken in his analysis. I haven't read the piece, but I think he's mistaken if that is his analysis, as you put it. I believe that in order to get independence, we need a unified movement. The SNP is clearly the key part, or a key part of that movement. And I've been a member of the SNP now for 40 years, and I'm certainly not changing my view.
The Daily Record says there's speculation that former First Minister Alex Salmond may join the party. He would be quite a rallying figure, would he not?
I have no idea whether that speculation is founded on anything at all. I tend to deal in fact, as I've been trying to do with you, over state aids rather than speculation.
Thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. That's Michael Russell, Scotland's Constitution Secretary.